The Mental Health Matters, a podcast for teens show, is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials discussed from this podcast is at the listener's own risk. This podcast is not an alternative for mental health assistance and/or counseling with a licensed professional. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional diagnosis or treatment. Listeners should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have, and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. For any specific medical questions about your condition and/or concerns, please contact your healthcare provider. This podcast should not be considered professional advice, but rather for the sole purpose of information and education.
From Woodstown High School
and the Communications Academy,
this is Mental Health Matters, a podcast for teens.
I'm Nate Thomas.
And I'm Katarina DeWitt.
This is a podcast about teenagers and mental health, because as teens, we have a lot going on in life. Stress, anxiety, etc.
Life gets pretty hard, and listening to other teens and their experiences with what they struggle with and how they deal with it can help.
Before we get started today, we're going to be talking about grief and death. If you or someone you know is experiencing these, seek out your school's student assistant counselor or a licensed professional.
So, Nate, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing okay. As you know, I wasn't in school yesterday, and that was a little scary because I was at the doctor's. And I just don't like the doctors that much, but everything went well, so I'm doing okay. I'm cat sitting, actually, for my grandmom, so I've been a little stressed because I've been having to keep up with that and the play, which is November 15th to the 18th if anybody wants to buy tickets, because we need some more people to come see the play. It's Little Women, but yeah. How about you, Kat?
I'm doing good. I've been feeling a little stressed planning this, but now that we're here, I'm very excited. I get that, though, feeling very overworked, like with cheer practice after school and then coming home and having to do homework.
Oh my gosh,
I feel very overwhelmed.
It's like a balance. It really is a balance. Like your school life and then your after school life, but yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. And I am actually very excited for this podcast. Yeah. So when you talk to your friends, how do you describe this podcast to them?
Well, I tell them it's about mental health and trying to look at it through the eyes of someone our age, of teenagers, and explore their experiences.
Yeah, and not only does this podcast contain what's on our minds, it also contains what's on the minds of other students who are our age.
Yeah, it gives them a chance to open up about issues that affect them super closely and how they deal with those issues. And today we have Miss Mack, our student assistance counselor, with us today to help give them advice about the situations that they're going through.
Hi.
Miss Mack, if you want to tell us a little bit about your role as a counselor here at Woodstown?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role here is very similar to your school counselor's roles. I always say it differs in terms of I don't really talk about the academic stuff, so you can come to me, but it literally took me a whole year last year to even find the GPA for a student. So I can help direct you your way, but I'm not the best resource to go into. That's not my area of expertise. I'm more here for the students, right? I always say the student, you as a person comes first before you as a student. So if you're dealing with things going on at home or you're dealing with relationship issues, right, that's going to affect you in school. You're not going to be able to sit in class and listen to your teacher or pay attention if there's something else that you're struggling with socially or emotionally. So my role is really to talk to the students in terms of that and kind of help them figure out those challenges and help them navigate through that, be that extra layer of support within the school system. Yeah, that's basically a little bit about what I do.
Awesome, great. And I know, as someone who has come to you to talk about issues, it's so important to have someone who has that, confidentiality with a student. So today we're talking mainly about dealing with grief. Can you tell me a little bit about the grieving process or how you would help someone who is going through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, grief was one of the topics that I used to be really afraid of navigating through because it's just one of those things where you're always like, what's the right thing to say, right? But within the past couple years, I've realized the more people that come to me about grief, the more excited I get about it, right? The more that I'm willing to help. And really, sometimes it is just that lending ear. Yeah, grief can be the loss of a loved one, but it can be the loss of a relationship, right? The loss of a house. I know one of my supervisors, her house burnt down, and she was grieving over that, right? So grief comes in many shapes and sizes, and most of us go through it. I can't say that there's an exact process of grief, but we do have your typical stages, right? So you do have the denial stage. That's kind of where you think to yourself, like, this isn't happening, right? We have the anger stage. You're kind of angry that this happened. You have the bargaining stage. This is where you kind of start like bargaining with the world. What is it that I can do to make sure that this person or this thing can come back? Right? Do I have to give up this part of my life in order for this to happen, right? So you kind of start making these amends and transactions with like energy in the world. And then we have depression, right? So I think that one is the one that we all know most about, is when you kind of hit that sad phase. And then acceptance, when you're like, okay, this happened and I can get over it. However, it doesn't go as linear as we think it happens, right? Just because you hit acceptance doesn't mean that you're going to be completely over it. You can jump right back into anger. You can jump right back into depression, right? So I think that's a misconception that we have, is that once you go through all the stages, you'll be completely done with it. You won't. At any time you can be triggered, and at any time you can go right back into one of the stages and go through the grief process all over again.
Yeah, and I don't think that's something like, at least for myself, I didn't really understand until I actually did go through it. Because, I mean, when I was younger, you hear of the grieving process, you hear of the stages, and you're like, that can't be real, right? Like, you know, I'd get sad, obviously, but I don't see myself getting angry or trying to bargain. But after the loss of a loved one, which was my grandfather, I found myself going through every single one of the stages. And just like how you said, you can jump right back into it. I mean, even like years after like the loss of a loved one, if some like memory sparks in your head, it can definitely bring you back to a certain stage. Yeah. Which is why it is really good to have somebody to talk to, especially if it's a therapist or even a student assistant counselor like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always going to be there, right? Sometimes it's going to get lighter, and sometimes it's going to get heavier. And it's not something that you can predict. And each person that you lose, or each thing that you lose in your life, is going to be different and vary in experience.
When we come back, we're going to talk to two students here at Woodstown and explore their experience dealing with grief, Lucy and Bianca Hunter.
Humans have been communicating for millions of years, from cave drawings, text messages, even interpretive dance. Humans have developed tons of ways to communicate because almost half of teens have been affected by mental illness. We should be using every form of communication to break down stigmas and save lives. So let's draw, text, even dance. So let's talk, human to human.
Welcome back. So today our guests we have are Lucy Hunter and Bianca Hunter, and they're here to talk about their experiences. But before we get into that, I would just like you guys to tell the podcast a little bit more about yourselves.
Okay, hi, I'm Lucy Hunter. I'm a senior at Woodstown High School, and I do swim and I do soccer, and I'm part of like the Candle Club.
Hello, my name is Bianca Hunter. I am a junior at Woodstown High School. I do soccer, and I recently have been a manager for soccer. I also run track.
Are you a manager for boys or girls soccer?
Girls soccer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I used to play, but I just switched to be a manager.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What did that have to do like with anything like stressful going on in your life, or you just kind of thought, the sport isn't really for me anymore?
It got to like the point where like the sport wasn't really for me anymore, and I just wasn't feeling like happy doing the sport, but I didn't want to get FOMO and just like quit doing it, if you know what I mean.
No.
So like I still wanted to be like around all the girls because like I love all of their energies, and like seeing all my friends after school without me having to like drive there, like just going from like school to practice, it's like I don't have to run or do anything, but I can still like see you guys doing this.
Yeah, no. I mean, I understand that. Because like I felt the same way with baseball. Like I love the sport, but when I was playing it, I kind of realized I was like, this just isn't the same like when I was younger. So
It gets draining.
yeah, it does. It does.
I was upset when she didn't play.
Yeah,
but
she was upset when
I wanted her to play so we could have like one last season together, but I understand why she didn't, like why she went to manage.
She was more upset
better.
than I
think
was.
it's better that you went to manage.
I
so.
agree.
Well, you guys were still technically together for it.
Yeah,
we are
we're
together.
always
she was there
together,
for my
it doesn't
last
matter.
season.
Yeah. So obviously you two are very close.
Yeah,
like
We are
siblings.
16 months apart.
Extremely close.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, because obviously, I mean, Kat, we both have siblings, but I
Yeah.
don't know about you, and I'm not going to say anything about you, but for me, I'm really not that close with my siblings, and that has to do with age differences and other things, but it seems like you guys have been through a lot, and it has helped you guys, like, get closer.
Yeah,
Definitely.
So to talk about that, I know that you guys had a younger brother who passed away in 2016. Do you guys want to talk about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so our brother was born in 2010. His name was Noah. And he was born with a heart condition. It's called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So that means that the left side of his heart wasn't fully developed. So, like, from the time that he was in the womb, they knew about it. And he wasn't able to do a lot of the things that other kids could do. Like, he was on a lot of machines, a ventilator. He couldn't breathe right. He, like, had a colostomy bag, so he couldn't, like, go to the bathroom and stuff like that. And he also had a feeding tube, so he couldn't eat either. So it was very weird going through that, because most people with younger siblings, it's like they don't have problems like that.
He also wasn't supposed to make it 6 months. So
Yeah.
it was like just crazy for us to like, I don't know, deal with that too. Because we had to like think about not having him and then him being there for so long and then getting like taken away.
Yeah,
Now-
we would hear adults talk about how he wasn't like expected to live past however many months. So it was like,
Like adults would be like, "Oh my goodness, like I'm surprised like he's been
Yeah.
To your face?
Like not to my face.
like
but
I would
they've
hear
had
like
conversations.
grandparents talking about like, oh, he's a miracle. It's a
Yeah.
miracle that he's been alive for this long. And I agree that it was a miracle, but it was just hard to hear.
Especially so young. You guys
Exactly,
were, okay, how
exactly.
old were you guys when he passed away?
I was 11.
I was 10.
And I mean,
That's
that's like that's a hard age to be dealing
Yeah.
with a grief like
Yeah,
that.
especially I don't even know my emotions at all. Like
Yeah.
now, it's crazy that I had to deal with them when I was in like only 10 years old.
Yeah. I mean, now you said he wasn't even supposed to make it. He was supposed to make it like 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you think that added a little bit more stress and like a little bit more anxiety? Because
Definitely.
you know, like I would never even want to have to imagine like waking up and not knowing.
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly.
It did, but at a certain point, we just thought that he was going to live forever. Not forever, but like, as
a
long
normal
as I
life.
would live, you know? So, like, I didn't think that I would have to deal with him passing away. Like, I would imagine what it would be like when he was, like, 13 years old, or, like, when he was adult. I was like, oh, who would he marry? Like, who would he have a family with? Like, would he have girlfriends? But, like, stuff like that. Like, I would just wonder what it would be like, and I had
That's so
no
cute,
idea.
though.
Yeah. So, I know it sounds bad when we talk about, like, all the stuff that he had to go through, like, with the ventilators, the machines, but it was normal for us. Like, we didn't see anything wrong with it. It was normal to us. It was normal to our friends, because they had been around him as long as they've been around us, so no one really, like, batted an eye about it.
And at the end of the day, that's still like your flesh and blood, your brother. You
Yeah.
want to
Oh,
do what you
yeah.
can to help him survive. Like,
And it was like a very cool experience because he had 2 home nurses, and they would like come and like treat him and like do all the like things that they had to do. And like I would sit there, I don't know about you, I would sit there and watch all the time. I was so interested. Literally wanted to be a doctor because of this. And it's just crazy to learn from it. Like seeing doctors, like hearing doctors talk about stuff like other people wouldn't know, like my age wouldn't know. But like when they're talking about it with me and Lucy, it's just like, oh, we know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it was like, so when he passed away, it wasn't just like the loss of him. We also lost those nurses because they were with us every single day. They like basically lived there. And there was not like there wasn't like a period of time that they wouldn't be there. It would always be like one or the other, or both of them together. So having to go from not being able to see them after seeing them every single day without fail, it was really hard. Like it felt like I just couldn't see them ever again, which obviously isn't true, but
Have you seen them since?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's very good.
Yeah. We still keep in touch. We love
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you still want to go into the medical field or be a doctor? Or?
I've thought about it, but I don't know. After my brother passed away, I kind of lost that touch. If you know what I
Passion.
mean? That passion for it. So like I've thought about being like an anesthesiologist and like stuff, but I don't know if I would go like into like the hardcore medical field.
Oh yeah, no. And I mean, I kind of can relate to that because I used to actually. My mom is a nurse, and my whole family has been in the line with medical field, and I thought I was going to do the same thing, but after my papa passed away, in the hospital, I just kind of grew a disinterest towards that, and I don't know if that was because of his passing or just the idea of hospitals are not like my favorite. I don't.
Yeah, no,
I
don't
agree
know
with that.
about
I understand that completely. Like hospitals are scary now, just the smell of it and just the
Yes.
environment.
Just, like-
it brings me back to a place that I used to be in.
Sometimes I'll smell like hand sanitizer and I'll just think of like the hospital and I'm just like whoa.
And
It
it's,
just
like-
brings you back.
It's a very specific smell too.
You guys talked a little bit about. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I forgot it. That's why.
You guys talked a little bit about hearing what adults had to say about your brother when you were young. Can you tell me a little bit about like? I know that you guys talked to me about like having kids your age like make comments when he would be on buses for field trips. What other experiences have you guys had that made you realize like this is not this is not normal, but this is different?
We just got a lot of questions, I feel like. I feel like people were scared to talk about it also.
And it's not a very common, it's a very, very rare heart disease. So not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people know that someone so young could be going through something like that,
And I feel like when people don't understand something, they just decide not to care about it.
Yeah.
Because, that the saying ignorance is bliss. Because, I mean, like, I understand that completely. Like, obviously, you guys know a lot about it
Yeah.
because you had someone who you loved go through it, but people who don't really know about it aren't going to, like, bat an eye.
Exactly.
Which, obviously, I'm sure that didn't make you guys feel well
not
at all. Yeah.
So it was like weird. After our brother passed away, we moved. So it was hard to explain to people what we had gone through and also explain that like he had a heart condition. So like when you talk about grief, it's like that grief and then you also have to add on, oh, well, he had like a disability and he like it was kind of expected but also kind of not. Like it's just very different.
Yeah. How would you say that dealing with this? You guys were in school when this happened, right?
No,
It was I
But, like
remember-
during the school year, I mean.
Oh,
it was-
yeah,
it was
yeah,
during
yeah.
the school year.
It was actually the night that he passed away. It was our winter concert.
yeah.
The night of our winter concert. So, I don't know. Do you?
Yeah, so I played the flute and so I
see that.
was playing in my concert and we had gotten home. We were all relaxing. I was sleeping on the couch and then I woke up like probably 9 or 10 and my mom and my dad were just freaking out. And I get very anxious about things like that. Like if I don't know what's going on, I'm very anxious about it. So I was like freaking out. My mom's like running outside. I'm like, what's going on? And then I realized that it was something with my brother. I like went to go to the bathroom and I saw him in his room and I saw my grandmother and my aunt. And it was just very scary having to witness. And then the day after, we had to go to my great-grandmother's funeral, and I had missed school, obviously, for the funeral. And then the next day, I was just right back into school. And I know my mom was sleeping. I ended up going in late. Bianca was sleeping, too. And I was the only one that, like, wanted to go. I was like, I have to go to school. I have to be there. And it was just, I feel like I used school as a way to close myself off. Like if I was doing fine in school, then nobody would like think that something was wrong.
I feel like a lot of teens agree with that, even with minor issues. Like a lot of doctors even think like, oh, you can't have ADHD if you have good grades. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people fall into that.
Yeah, so I thought that if I had gone to school and I showed my classmates that I was there, they wouldn't think that anything was wrong.
Yeah.
And my parents too. Like I wanted to be strong for them because going through like the death of a child is insane. Like no parent should have to go through that. But I just felt terrible for them. I felt terrible for Bianca, so I wanted to be the strong one.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people really like understand that, because obviously it's terrible for the sibling, but you also have to think that sibling needs to be there for their mother and father, because their mother, like, moms and dads they're great, they're amazing, but like they can't be your support system constantly. Sometimes you need to be their support system. So it's very great that you were able to do that.
It was hard for me. Like, in the moment, it wasn't hard because I just stepped up to that role. But afterwards, like, I realized how it had an effect on me, because I wasn't really dealing with my grief. And if I was, it was like using different things as an outlet instead of like actually like working through my grief and like talking about it or like dealing with it mentally. I just went to a place where I didn't have to think about it and didn't have to deal with it.
I know you wanted to let Lucy go first, but how would you say the way you dealt with that differed from her, Bianca?
Well, we like kind of went through the same thing. Like, that night happened, so like it was just a blur, big blur. I just remember the day after. I remember going to my grandma's funeral and like just not thinking that it was real, like being like, I'm gonna go home, and he's gonna be there. Like, when we went to our aunt's house that night that he passed, because my mom and dad just didn't want us to be in the house with like our grandparents or whatever. So like the whole time we were at our aunt's, I was just like sitting there thinking like, he's fine, he's fine. We're gonna go home and he's gonna be fine. Cause he had a big boy bed, so I would like always go in there and snuggle with him. I thought it was gonna be like just another night.
This is making me sad. Did you go to school the next day?
So, Miss Mack, you're obviously the expert on this. How would you say, like, how long would you say the grieving process usually takes?
I want to say it's really a lifetime, right? Like, I go into my field because I'm passionate in what I do, because I have had a lot of people struggle with many things, right? And I've lost a lot of people in my life. And there are going to be moments where I watch something and I'm going to think of my grandmother, right? Yesterday we had a staff meeting and we were learning how to give Narcan to anybody, and I had to do that with one of my friends, right? So at any time I could be thinking about anything, and that's for everybody, right? Yeah. Something I say in grief, like when I work with somebody in grief, is that I'm never going to make you forget that person. It's how can we remember them, right? And how can we give their life meaning? I think that's so important, is how we can keep them alive.
Yeah, I saw you guys nod your head.
I agree completely. Yeah. Like, at first, it was hard to talk about my brother, and I don't know if you agree, but it was just really hard to talk about him, and I couldn't, like, talk about him without breaking down and crying. And now I love to talk about him. I love to tell stories about him to my friends and my boyfriend, and I love remembering him and, like, showing pictures and, like, being able to see him. And it does make me sad now, but I love how I've built myself up to be able to just talk about it.
No, go ahead.
It, like, does, like, obviously make me sad. But, like, there's some things that, like, I, like, love talking about, like, about him. And, like, telling my friends and, like, my boyfriend about him and, like, explaining, like, things that they don't know, but, like, Lucy knows. I'd be like, Lucy would laugh her butt off right now if she was here, right?
He was just also, like, such a strong kid to, like, be able to go through all those surgeries and, like, all that pain. And I just love talking about how strong he was, and he's an inspiration for me because he was just so strong to be able to go through all that.
He was so ornery, too.
Yeah.
Like, he was so ornery. It was crazy.
Like,
we loved him.
Yeah, even though
he was so funny. So funny. He, like, even though he, like, couldn't talk or, like, do, like, the things that we could, you could sit there and, like, just laugh from, like, the way that he treats, like, people and, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, even though people didn't think that he was, like, quote unquote, like, a normal kid, he was completely normal. Like, he had his own way of communicating. He was funny. He knew how to work a phone so well. Like, he was so smart on a phone. He could, like, look stuff up. He would always find, like, bad videos. He would always find bad videos to watch and, like, show it to my mom and me and Bianca and our nurses.
He would, like, find, like, remixes of, like, Bob the Builder and stuff and, like, play them and, like, search it up on his own, and we'd be like, what are you watching?
Like, he was just so smart and funny, and like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing. Like before he would even play it, he would just sit there and like smile at you and like look at you, and then he would play it.
I know you guys are talking about him now, and obviously you honor him and remember him by talking about him to others. Is there anything else that you guys do to honor him and remember him?
On his birthday, we usually have cake. We go visit his grave, and on his anniversary too, like his death anniversary, we go visit him. I remember one year we like released balloons on his birthday, and we try to celebrate every year that he would have been here, because it's crazy to think about how he would have been like 13 years old.
Exactly. Like it's
year.
so crazy to think that I would have had a teenage brother.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think about like what he would have been doing.
Exactly. Like I would just love to see him like walking through the hallways, like saying hi to everybody, like the way that me and Lucy do, and it's just like I miss that.
Yeah. I always have like a picture. I have a picture of him in my car with me all the time.
Aww.
So I just feel like I always have him with me. I love like having little lion things, because he loves having lions, stuffed animals.
Now, obviously, I'm not the expert, so I'd ask for your opinion, Miss Mack. But when I think of it, I tend to think the best way to like combat sad thoughts or sad feelings is to just think of happier times or happier memories. I think something that we humans have that we take a little bit for granted is our memory. I mean, when I'm thinking of anybody in my life that I've lost, I just only, like, the main thing I can focus on is the good things, because that's what helps me think they lived an amazing life, you know, they loved every second of it, and I'm glad that they had the life that they did, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And everyone is going to have their own way of navigating through their emotions. I do say that sometimes having the sadness is important so that you can feel it, because you can't release any of it until you do feel those emotions, right? But the happy memories are what gets us through, and the happy times are what gets us through. And when we are talking about something like grief, that's my favorite part of it all. Like, I love sitting there when I'm working with somebody with grief is to hear those stories, right? Like, tell me about them. That's the first thing I say. Tell me about them. What's your favorite memory, right? Because I do think that that's what helps us navigate through our emotions the best.
I feel like balance is very important, like with what you said, like to be able to go through bad things, you also have good things, and to be able to go through good things, you also have bad things. So there's always good and bad, and you have to experience both of them to have like a fulfilled life, I think.
Yeah.
She said she likes to ask about your favorite memory. Do you guys want to share yours?
Ooh, I have to think.
I have one. Okay. One time, me, Lucy, and my brother and one of his nurses, we went to the park that was down the street from our house.
I know this story.
Okay. I don't know if you guys know like the swings, but they'd like have handicap swings.
Mm-hmm.
So we sat my brother in it, and his colostomy bag exploded, and there was poop all over the seat. It was like crazy.
She had to use a leaf to clean it up.
His nurse had to get a leaf from the floor and clean it up. I was like, oh my gosh. It was crazy. That was a good memory. That's so
very
funny.
I always forget about that. One of my favorites was we were taking Christmas pictures one year. I forget. We were in like JCPenney, or we were in the mall taking pictures, and he would not stop crying. Like, he just kept crying. So we were like trying to calm him down by singing Happy Birthday. Like, that was the only thing that would cheer him up. So we're all, my mom and his two nurses, we were all screaming Happy Birthday. And like he would like smile for a picture, and he like had my hair in his grasp, so he was like holding it, and there's a picture of me like holding his hand while he's pulling my hair while we're trying to get him to laugh in the mall.
It's so funny because the picture is literally up in our house
right now. Like, so nobody knows that background story, but we know
you can tell in the
like,
picture that he got a hold of that hair.
Like, when we say he was ornery, he was ornery.
He knew what he was doing at all times.
Yeah.
So you guys touched a little bit about what it was like dealing with this. Like, as so young, do you remember what in specific you did as a way to cope?
I really used, like I said, I used school as a way to, like, not think about it, but, like, as a coping mechanism, I would always read and, like, play my music. So like I said, I played the flute, and the night that he passed away, I was like at a concert, but I didn't let that stop me. Like I still played the flute, and I kind of used it as a way to remember him. And also I just loved reading because I know that it wasn't a way to deal with the emotions, but it was a way for me to like be in a different world. So like I loved to read and like kind of escape what I was going through.
I use that for myself, like for way less serious things. So I can only imagine that must have been really helpful.
I'd say hobbies probably are a very important part of helping people deal with grief. I mean, I know whenever I'm actually like stressed or, and obviously that's not grieving, but like stressed or sad or grieving, I usually take to one of my hobbies. For instance, I actually used to swim a lot when I would be stressed because it would for some reason just help me process through my emotions. And it's really cool that you were like that you used your flute, and like obviously I'm sure that helped you improve with what you were doing as well.
Have you ever seen the movie Soul?
Yes.
When you said, oh my God, I forgot. I tried to put that on the TV the other day. Yeah, you guys, that's when you said that, that reminded me of that movie.
Yeah. Like the middle school band.
Yeah. That was me too, though. I was in the same place, Lucy. I was playing the saxophone in my middle school.
I played trombone.
So did I. I played trombone for a little bit, and then I switched to the drums. The big drum with
The bass.
No, it was the small drums that had the
snare.
stick.
My sister played that.
I played that. Hannah or Summer?
Hannah. Summer did not play an instrument.
I didn't see her playing this.
She did color guard, though. Yeah.
I can so see her
Yeah.
doing that.
What about you, Bianca? What did you say you got into as a way to cope?
It honestly was all a blur to me, to be honest, but that was like the same thing. But I would write a lot and draw, I feel like all the time. I also used to play softball, so that was like a really big distraction for me. My dad used to be a coach for my softball team, so like we would like go after like practice and like have a catch, or go before and like he'll help me practice with like my batting and stuff.
What position did you play?
I used to be catcher.
Really? Wow.
I'm so jealous. When I played softball, I wanted to be a catcher so bad.
I used to be catcher, and then they had me in like the I forget what the positions are. Yeah, they had me in the
Outfield.
I was a shortstop. I had a crazy arm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Crazy arm.
I hated being a catcher though. I hate
What?
It's scary.
it.
It is scary. That's why my mom wouldn't let me do it. She was like, "You're gonna get beat in the face," and I'm like, "Yeah, I probably would."
I would get scared that the ball was just gonna come flying in my face, and I was just like gonna have like a broken face.
I was left-handed, so I kind of like had to play first. That was just like what I had to do. But so obviously you two coped in your own separate ways, but when you were looking for like comfort, who was the first person you guys would go to?
Each other.
Each other?
Like,
Yeah.
because we had gone through the same thing. Like, obviously, we dealt with it in different ways, but we had gone through the exact same thing, and nobody else really could relate to that because there's not a lot of people that I know that have dealt with the loss of a sibling. So being able to be so close to someone and also go through the exact same experience, she was always the first person that I went to.
Exactly. She said exactly.
And obviously, I'd assume that brought your relationship. I mean, I'm sure you guys were close before, but I'm sure that also brought you guys together.
It did. It
A lot.
did bring us together a lot.
We were really close before. I feel like I was closer with my brother before he passed away than I was to Lucy. And me and Lucy got really close after my brother passed away.
Because you were, like, the only, well...
I was the middle child, so I always felt left out. I always, like, she was always doing something with her older friends. I thought that, like, she was so cool. I would always want to hang out with her and her friends. They would never want me to hang out with them. So I would, like, be there with, like, my brother and, like, stuff. And, like, he not trying to, like, be like, I want attention. But, like, a lot of the time, all of my parents' attention would go towards my brother. And, like, I felt like I wasn't able to show my emotions the way that I wanted to because I thought that I was going to be annoying or, like, a nudge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand. Because, like, they were going through their own stuff. Like, they worked really hard. They were, like, great parents.
Exactly.
And so it was hard having, like, not being able to really talk to, or, like, just feeling bad about talking to them about it because that loss for them is so different than how the loss was for us. They're just, and it's not to say that, like, our loss was worse than theirs or theirs was worse than ours. It's just very different. Like, they're two totally different things, going through the loss of a sibling and going through the loss of a child.
Do you guys want to talk about how that affected your whole family? Like, I know, other than bringing you guys closer together.
I feel like a lot of our extended family were like closer to us, and everyone thought that we were so mature.
Yeah.
Like everyone that came up to us, they would be like, "I can't believe that you're going through this. Like you are so strong," and it's just like I'm not.
Yeah, do you think
Yeah.
that made you
Trying to,
feel
like-
worse or made you feel better?
I mean, me personally, it made me feel good because I wanted to feel like I was the one that was being strong.
I agree, but she was always the one to put on like a face and like be strong. I show my emotions. If one thing about me, my face is gonna say it before my mouth does.
Yeah.
So it was just, I don't know.
Like, was there any part of you that was like, I don't want to have to be this mature? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Definitely.
glad you think I'm this mature, but I don't want to be. I'm
Yes.
only 12,
Especially-
11.
Yeah, going through the loss of, like having a disabled sibling in the first place, like you have to like be really, really mature to be able to help with, like we had to help with him, we had to help with our parents, and like it was just a lot. And then going through that loss, like I'm glad that I went through it. Not glad that I went through it. Like I am glad that I had experience that made me who I am today. Like that experience made me mature, it made me strong, and I feel that I can be there for others now, like who have gone through loss. Like I want to be someone that people can talk to about it, because even though I still get sad about it and I'm still like dealing with the grieving process and I will never be done dealing with that, I want people to see like how far I've come from it and like see that they, like it's not going to end their world. It's terrible what they go through, but they're going to come out so much stronger after they go through it.
I agree. That's why I asked you guys to be like on the podcast. I definitely not like me and Bianca were friends for so long before I ever realized that you guys like even had a brother that passed, and not like that says anything. It just like it shows like that's not who you are, and that's kind of what you're saying. Like it's you. It like adds to your character, but that's not who you are. It doesn't end at that.
So, Miss Mack, would you say that like growing up with such grief can like cause a spike in maturity in children? Like, have you seen something like that?
I would definitely say it depends, right? Like, again, everybody varies and has a different experience. I do tend to see that when you do deal with grief at such an early age, you start viewing life differently.
Yeah.
And so with that different perspective, and in your specific case, right, like knowing the medical conditions and all of that, that's not something that a normal child goes through.
Yeah.
Right?
it's,
That's
like,
different.
not something to think about.
Exactly. So I would say that, yeah, there's different maturities that come with that. But again, it varies and it's different for everyone. And I think having that support system in school, what that support looks like, right? You guys had each other.
Right.
So you guys were able to mature together, right? But if you guys didn't have each other, right? Or for people who don't have that support, that might look a little bit different.
Picking up.
Why is everyone looking at me?
Well, you did pick up the piece of paper, and I was like, okay.
Um,
Camp Aaron.
There we go.
I think like, well, this goes back to like coping and dealing with grief. Like, right after it happened, like that summer, our parents had gotten us into a camp. It was called Camp Aaron, so it was for people, or it was for kids that were going through grief. So we were like all together, and we just made like so many new relationships. And like I still talk to some of the girls to this day that were there with me, and we've all gone through different types of grief. Like we've all lost different people in our lives, but it was very cool to be around people who had also gone through grief and that I can talk to about it with now.
It was cool to be around kids my age that understood, like, what was happening,
yeah.
if you know what I mean.
No, I didn't.
There was also a candle ceremony towards the end of Camp Aaron, and it was a very good moment for me because we got to like go down and like send off candles, I think, on the lake and like say who we're there for and what was their name. And I remember being so nervous to like go down and like say why I was there and what his name was. But like as soon as I got down I did it, and I just like not felt a release, but like felt better about it. And like after that, I was like able to like talk about it more without becoming upset, if you know what I mean.
That's an awesome way to cope. I never realized that they had like things such as that.
Camps, yeah. And they like had reunions too. Like,
That's
we
a
had a
great.
reunion.
That's like such a good.
Awesome.
You always think like society is evil, and then you hear things like that. And you're like,
Yes.
this is great.
Yeah.
That's like such a good thing in the world. I love that.
I know all the counselors were so nice,
And they had
everything.
also gone through loss too, so you had the counselors to be able to look up to and see what they have gone through and how strong they are.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So Lucy, I know that you talked a little bit about how like you want to seem strong so you can help others. Do you like have a specific thing that you want to do to help others, like regarding to this, or?
I mean, I just want people that I know and like even people that don't know me to be able to talk about it with me. Like there are people that I have talked to about grief before and like that I didn't know that they've gone through that and they didn't know what I've gone through, but it's just very nice to be able to like relate to someone, and especially like people who are like younger than me who have gone through it. Like I want them to realize that like other people are going through stuff that they don't know about, and that we can all be there to support each other. Like I want to be a support for other people.
Yeah.
And as a counselor who is the support for other people, Miss Mack, how do you find yourself helping others who come to you dealing with grief?
I know specifically in the school, and it's something that I did starting my internship, right, is to, again, connect other people with other people who have that same experience. So one of my favorite groups that I do is a grief group for students who have lost a parent, right, because that experience that you have is different. You can't talk to a friend that hasn't been through that experience and seek advice, right? Or sometimes the friend doesn't really have the right things to say.
Exactly.
So it just kind of puts them in an awkward spot. You're in an awkward spot. But that's definitely one of my favorite things to do is connect with other people. And then if it isn't the same experience, right, like talking about how maybe somebody else's loss and your loss could be similar.
Yeah, I think that's actually really good because when I experienced grief for the first time, my immediate thought was, oh my God, I want to help other people that have experienced the same stuff as me, because it was really hard for me to go through it without anybody else. So just being a support, like just even a shoulder to lean on, like that's something very big for me after experiencing grief. And I feel like you can say that about most people who've experienced grief. You know, they end up wanting to help others who are going through the same thing because they know how it felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like what I said earlier, right? Something that I went through. And so now as I grow up, I kind of want to help make sure that other people are able to navigate through it. I know something it's funny, but it's not. I always ask everybody, like, what are some of the most horrible things that people say to you to try to comfort you, right? And
Yeah.
there's some responses out there that you would be like, what? Someone said that to you, right? So even just navigating through the aftermath, right? Not just the dealing with the specific experience of it, but now for the rest of your life, right? How you're going to navigate through those after emotions.
I feel like that's really important to talk about. That's why it's important to talk to other people, is like navigating through those emotions, because you just, after going through a loss, you feel like you're so alone. Like you feel like nobody else relates to you, and nobody's going to relate exactly to what you've gone through, but there are people that are going to relate by going through grief.
Especially when it's like a person that has gone through like the same thing that you have.
Like each experience is different,
Yeah.
but again, they're like all still like at their core, you're losing someone that you were so close to, that you loved so much.
Like I'm so glad that I had my sister to like go through this with me, because like if I were to talk to somebody whose like brother passed away, they might not have the same views as me. They might not have been as close to their brother as I was, you know what I mean? So I just feel like we were on the same like wavelength. We were like thinking the same thing, so like we knew how to like comfort each other and like be that person.
It's been incredible talking to you guys about this, and we will talk more about it after the break.
The Mental Health Matters, a podcast for teens show, is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials discussed from this podcast is at the listener's own risk. This podcast is not an alternative for mental health assistance and/or counseling with a licensed professional. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional diagnosis or treatment. Listeners should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have, and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. For any specific medical questions about your condition and/or concerns, please contact your healthcare provider. This podcast should not be considered professional advice, but rather for the sole purpose of information and education.
All right, welcome back from the break. Miss Mack, can you tell us about some resources you have for anyone who might be dealing with this issue?
Yeah, so if you go to Woodstown, right, then I definitely run that group that I was talking about. But something that other students have expressed interest in is actually just the grief and death of a lost one, right, or lost loved one. So that's definitely another group that I'm planning on hosting and facilitating, so kind of navigating and setting up students with other students who have that same experience. Something I would also, suggest is that sometimes just go to that trusted adult, right? There's a lot of trusted adults who have been through some of those same experiences, and that's just from me talking to the adults that are in the building. Your school counselors, right? There's always me, but just be able to voice and talk about your experience sometimes can help alleviate some of it. Outside resources, we now have a mental health hotline, which is great. It's new. It's 988. It's very similar to 911, so it's pretty easy to remember. I just would not mix them up. You can. I don't know. I've never tried it. It might be a fun experience. But they can help you navigate through all of your emotions. So this isn't just grief, but just mental health in general. However, there is this online website called findahotline.com, and they have tons of different hotlines for specific things. So with grief specifically, as I was scrolling through some of them, there's one like Lost to Suicide, or MAD, which is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, right? So maybe more like parents that have lost a child to drunk driving. So it's more specific. So I would just go through there and look through and see if there's anything that pertains to you or connects more to your experience.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Miss Mack. And thank you guys so much for sharing your experience. It means a lot, and I know a lot of people will find hearing that very helpful.
Yes, it's also not a light thing to talk about. I mean, it's very, very amazing of you guys to be sharing your experience, and we thank you deeply for that, Kat and I.
Miss Mack, is there anything else that you would like to tell the audience before we wrap up?
No, that's it. I just thank you girls so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Of course,
Just
it's my
talk
pleasure.
about-
I'm so glad that you came.
We were actually very happy that this was like a thing because we've never
Yeah.
really got to like talk about it to anyone.
Especially like publicly for everybody to
Exactly.
see. I'm very happy that it'll be shared with other people who might be going through the same thing.
I'm happy to help others.
Be sure to listen to our next episode to hear more from Mental Health Matters, a podcast from a teen's perspective.